hurtful could that feel to live all the way up into your old age or being older feeling like you didn't live up to your purpose or you didn't fulfill yourself as a woman. Like, that hurt me. Just having that point of view pointed out in this text, and it's just like it made me think like during those times things were different, so that was a thought process back then, and it just made me more appreciative of things that we're privileged to do now, because it's just like, dang, they only thought them as useful for just bearing kids, and it's like, thank God that's not the thought process of today. But I guess that's just me as a woman thinking like that. It's not that important, but it hit me because some people go through those struggles. Like, how many people of today don't feel like they know their purpose or don't feel like they've completed what societal tasks feel like they should be completing just based off of what society thinks that you should be doing. And it's just like, how hurtful can that be to a person to feel like they're not completing things that's on other people's timelines when that's not always the purpose of God. Like the text said above, like there's an appointed time. Like, that was an appointed time for her. Like, she needed to have John in the age that she had John because John needed to be born in the time that he was born. Like, if she would have had him any sooner, he wouldn't have been able to complete whatever he needed to complete it in the time he was completing it. And it's just to have that burden on you when it's like it's not even a burden because God has a plan and you're perfect for his plan at the time that he's ready to give it to you. And this is a lot in this text, but there's that. So a little further in, right, it starts talking about John's actual birth, and it pretty much points out exactly what the angel told Zechariah before they made it to this time. So in this time, like, again, it comes back to where I was talking about how Zechariah and Elizabeth had to form a new type of intimacy with each other, and they had to relearn how to speak to each other. So again, I don't know when sign language was created or how they was able to talk to each other, but they was able to at least speak with each other from whatever time he got back from serving in the army, for lack of better words, all the way up to conceiving a baby and then 9 months. Like, that's a lot of time to not be able to communicate with somebody when y'all form of communication before was being able to talk to each other. So it made me start thinking like, well, how else was they able to talk to each other? And then this passage, like, okay, I feel like I'm going a little too far. But so in this passage, Elizabeth had John already, and her family and her neighbors were coming up to pretty much share in the joys of her being able to have John. And they start pretty much saying that God has showed her mercy by being able to let her conceive in her old age, right? Well, not even conceive, give birth. She didn't birth them by this point. So they then came up to circumcise him, and they wanted to name him. So they decided that they was going to name their baby for them, which was really weird to me. But again, I don't know the customs and the traditions from way back then, Who knows if that was just something that they did? Because even when, okay, so they wanted to name her baby after the dad. They wanted to call him Zachariah. But Elizabeth said, no, we're going to call him John. So the family was confused because they're like, there ain't nobody in your family named John. Like, where you get John from? And so it made sense because it's like, if you're not used to that name, like that would be questionable too. So I don't think it was more so of them just trying to name her child for them. But again, it's like that sometimes. Like your family think they know what's best for you, and it's like, nah, God got a plan. God done told us what to do, and this is the plan. But what isn't stated in this text is whether Zachariah and Elizabeth came up with that together or if God gave them that separately. So we know that the angel told Zachariah beforehand to name the child John once it was born, but it doesn't say if Zachariah told Elizabeth that they were going to name the child John. But again, they then formed a whole nother type of intimacy, being with each other with this barrier in place. And who knows, they may have discussed this beforehand, but in this time it was confirmation of what Zachariah was told by the angel. So Elizabeth told them, no, we gonna name him John. And they get to questioning they whole little family and like, okay, well, you sound crazy, lady. We don't know where you got John from, so we gonna ask Zachariah what he want. So Zachariah wasn't able to speak out to them and tell them like normal, and sign language. If John wasn't a normal name for them, they wasn't able to sign language John to them, so they didn't gave him something to write on. And again, times back then is a little different. So we can easily pick up a pen and write down what we want to name somebody or what we trying to tell somebody. We don't know what they had back then. Like if we looking at just history, they was carving stuff into rocks to write. Like who knows what they had to be able to speak to each other in a written form, even though it do say they wrote a lot of letters. But who knows in their situation? Who knows? Like, was he gonna go grab a stick and write it out in the sand? Who knows? But in this situation, it says that they got him a writing tablet and he wrote the same name that Elizabeth had wrote. And in that moment, it came to the point in time all the way down to that. Like, I think me personally, I don't know if they was able to communicate this to each other because like it came down to it being that specific for him to be able to break what I'm going to say is a curse to be able to speak again. Like it was all the way fulfilling down to that very moment. And it's just like, it needed to be to that specific time for it to fulfill its purpose, even in that, all the way down to a name. Like God does things in his own ways for reasons, and even down to a name. But it's a lot to unpack in that. It shows a lot with just relationship. Like you have to be in a relationship for you to be able to even be able to do any of these things. Like it kept saying through these few texts that they was filled with the Holy Spirit. Like even from John speaking to the angel told John that the Holy Spirit, Zechariah, that the angel told Zechariah that John was going to be filled with the Holy Spirit in Elizabeth's womb. And when Elizabeth ended up speaking to Mary, the Holy Spirit was leaping in her womb when she heard Mary's voice. And it's a lot. I want to explain this so much better. So, Holy Spirit had already started moving. Holy Spirit had jumped into Elizabeth when Jesus was in Mary's womb and got to moving, and Elizabeth was prophesying to Mary. That's in the chapter. It's not even a chapter. It's still in Luke 1, but it's Luke 1, 26 through, nope, Luke 1, 39 through 45. Like, Mary went to go visit Elizabeth, and Elizabeth started prophesying to Mary about who Jesus was going to be. And in this moment, like, Zechariah's mouth was open and Holy Spirit started flowing through him, prophesying who John was finna be. So everything just had to be in its timing for all of this to be what God originally planned it to be. And to me, Zechariah, Elizabeth, and John had a cool little family. I just say you go read the story for yourself and get what you get out of it. Zechariah's song says a lot. So if you want to go read that, that's Luke 1, 67 through 80. But my whole thing is don't be in unbelief, because that can place you in a situation where it can, I hate that I have to use the word curse, but it placed a curse on Zechariah where he wasn't able to speak until an appointed time, all because of unbelief. And you can't let outsiders influence what you got going on with your family, because like the relatives and the neighbors wanted to name them something totally different than what the Holy Spirit told Zechariah and Elizabeth. And it just shows the intimacy that God gives to his chosen, God ordained marriages. Because like in Luke 1, Luke 1, 6. Yeah, I guess Luke 1, 6 kind of explains how, well, we could start at 5. Luke 1, 5 through 7 kind of explains God's favor or why he chose Elizabeth and Zechariah. And yeah, that's a little cool little story about John the Baptist before he was born. And sometimes we forget your parents got a whole life before you even make it here, and who knows what they had to go through before you even got here. So appreciate your parents, because the Bible even says so. It's a commandment.